a couple weeks before and let me know just how much she was struggling to understand Nehemiah at home and how desperate she was for a preschool that would help her grandson improve his speech skills. And spending just a few hours in the classroom with Nehemiah, I quickly realized what Grandma was talking about, and that it wasn't just an issue with his speech skills, it was actually an issue that ballooned into him not being able to connect with his peers and relate to his peers because of their inability to understand him. So both his peers and his teachers in our preschool classroom were struggling to understand Nehemiah, and at 3 years old, he was quickly becoming frustrated and overwhelmed by his inability to connect with them. Nehemiah's grandma was just overwhelmed, frustrated, and really needed support. Thankfully, they had found their way to VOCEL, and I knew that we were a program that prides ourselves on building children's language and communication skills, and that our program, a place that builds essential empathy and executive functioning skills as well through interactions, was exactly the type of program that Nehemiah needed. I was so happy to be able to work with Nehemiah and his grandma to be able to provide this experience that hopefully would help him to thrive in his early years, but then also have an incredible impact for his long term as well. I'm Jessie Ilhardt. I'm a co-founder of VOCEL and also our director of program and evaluation.
Good evening, I'm Kelly Lambrinatos. I also co-founded VOCEL with Jessie, and I lead as our executive director. And VOCEL exists because without it, children like Nehemiah wouldn't have had the opportunity to establish this critical foundation of communication skills that would not only set him up to be successful in school, but also in his career and social arenas in the future. For the past 2 years, Jessie and I have led VOCEL. We run a pilot preschool program on the far west side of Chicago. We focus our curriculum on a language-based approach, so building a foundation of communication skills for our children and then layering on the critical interpersonal and executive function skills that will again set them up not only to be successful in school, but also in the long run. Over those first 2 years, piloting our program with a group of 18 children, Nehemiah being one of those, we saw remarkable results. So quantitative and qualitative, and there was growing community demand. There's a lack of access to high-quality early childhood programs in the Austin community where our program operates, and so we were hearing left and right from families just how much was needed in the community, a wait list that we just frankly couldn't manage. We also knew that there was power in working in the earlier years. Preschool with their first teacher, their parent. So child and parent come and join together in our Child Parent Academy. It's taken a lot to get VOCEL where we are today, just a few short years after we opened our doors. And quite different than I think a lot of the speakers we heard here tonight. I know some folks have been part of new leaders or building excellent schools, and while we would have loved to engage in something like that to help get a program off the ground, that actually doesn't exist for early childhood programs. There's not as many avenues to launching or replicating high-quality programs. Despite this, we were determined to chart a course to make sure we could serve children like Nehemiah.
In the education world, I think we often tout the importance of not recreating the wheel. So why in a world that was fraught with that uncertainty and a lack of a roadmap, knowing that there would be funding barriers, facility challenges, issues with teacher pay, kind of why would we choose this, right? Starting a program for young children in Chicago is an uphill battle, as we were told many times while trying to start VOCEL, so why do it? For us, it was because the research, everything from economics to neuroscience, from linguistics to social science, tells us that the first 5 years of a child's life are absolutely crucial. We know that the brain is the most malleable in the early years that it will ever be, and so our interventions in those early years are the most likely to take hold and actually change a child's brain, which can then influence their trajectory beyond. So many of you in this room, I think, probably being a part of Teach for America can rattle off some of the statistics that illustrate the concerning disparities that exist in our current education system. I'm going to tell you about just a few of them that really relate specifically to early childhood. So first, we know that from the day a child is born until their 3rd birthday, they are forming 700 to 1,000 new neural connections in their brain every second for those 3 years. It's a lot of new neural connections that's happening in the brain. So those early years are incredibly important. Unfortunately, we also know that 48% of children from low-income communities begin kindergarten on track. So far more children than should be the case are starting off their school experience out of the gate already behind. What we also know is that 34% of all U.S. children enter kindergarten lacking the basic language skills to be able to learn to read. So setting up those kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade teachers with another uphill battle because children aren't coming in with the foundational language skills to be able to meet some of those outcomes and then are falling further and further behind. And Jennifer alluded to those 4th grade statistics that are incredibly scary and daunting and mean so much. And what we actually know is that those things start even earlier, and the probability if a child is a poor reader at the end of 1st grade is 90% that they are likely to still be a poor reader at the end of 4th grade. And so we can track some of those outcomes from 4th all the way on to 1st and talk about 6 and 7-year-olds where we are setting on a path to prison. And so really scary things, but the good news is that investing early really works, and we're starting to see our country move a little bit in that direction.
Another kind of body of research I want to touch on briefly is kind of the blending of neuroscience with the social sciences. And so we believe as a program this is something that's really critical for us to look at as we talk about the brain science and think about the brain architecture of our young children, but also what kind of is happening at a social science level. And so what more recent research has shown, it's actually highlighting that there's generational changes in terms of the quality and quantity of the relationships that we had. So, a couple decades ago, you might have asked someone, for example, how many friends they had or who they trusted, and they would rattle off, handfuls, dozens maybe of people. And what we're actually seeing is that those support networks, the number of people we trust, is actually shrinking over time. This is also true in terms of when we look at household makeup or who you live with or around. Decades ago, families were, very proximate to extended family members, or there were larger family sizes, and that is actually shrinking. And what we know is that one of the greatest challenges of poverty is actually isolation, and we're seeing that happen in our social fabrics right now. And what we believe as a program is that the importance of interaction, of connection, of relationships is really one of those keys to success in the long term, right? To be able to build a more connected world where people can work together to achieve, just like these kids on the screen here.
So just last week, I was in our classroom and observed a pretty special moment that I want to share with you all that really illustrates the empathy and the compassion and connection that we seek to foster in all of our children. I was accompanying a potential funder on an observational visit in our classroom, and we walked in during the morning meeting time. The children were gathered on the carpet, kind of like you see here, with their teacher, Miss Ruth, who's a TFA alum, it was sort of like you see here. Some children were sitting, some were laying on their stomachs, another child had his head on another child's shoulder, and through this all they were having a really riveting discussion about what they predicted would happen to their pumpkin seeds that they had planted in cups of soil the day before. And as we walked in, the guest, Erica and I, the kids kind of turned and looked and waved and then turned back to their teacher. And then all of a sudden, Jeremiah, who is the 2nd year student at our preschool, stands up, stretches out her arms and says, "Wait!" and marches back immediately to the back of the room where Erica and I were sitting and says, "We have to invite our visitor to join us." So she stretches out her arm to the visitor and leads her back to the circle. 2 of the kids scooted over, they made space for Erica, and immediately she had just become a part of their classroom community. And that moment, I think for a lot of people, would have just looked like a cute thing for a 4-year-old to do. But knowing early brain development and how typically egocentric children are at this age, it was such a salient demonstration of the empathy that we seek to develop. Because Jeremiah's only motivation in that moment was to help someone else other than herself feel comfortable and welcome in our classroom. And she also knew, like her lack of hesitation showed me as a coach of our teachers that Jeremiah knew exactly what her teachers value. She knew that she didn't have to ask for permission because our teachers value supporting one another and compassion above all else. So I was just so impressed with the empathy that I observed in her, and realized that that kind of empathy only comes from a program that really values those types of interactions and intentionally plans for them. A program that tells teachers that they should set rules and expectations based on the expectation of empathy and not on necessarily blindly following directions or other types of rules. So if you were to visit, I think you wouldn't see our children sitting and listening quietly to their teachers for most of the day, maybe for some of the day, but most of the time it's pretty loud in our classroom. It's not quiet. So why is that the case? Because at VOCEL, one of the things we really believe in is that the ability to communicate is power, and that language is a connector. And so if we believe that that's the case, then that means we should be spending all of our time with these children under the age of 5, working on helping them communicate with one another and connect with one another better.
So from an internal standpoint, we've worked really hard to refine our model over the past couple of years where we've been piloting before we kind of gear up for some expansion and scale in 2017, which was pretty exciting. So a few of the things that we do, we think about our teacher hiring and how we're bringing in folks that can be intentional language builders, really bringing in that conversation coupled with that empathy and compassion. We also keep a reduced ratio in our classroom, so that means there's just ample time for individualized support, small group interactions, and really a robust community. And we've seen, like I mentioned earlier, anecdotally, that this has really been working. But we're Teach for America alums, so we needed some hard quantitative numbers to use as well. So one thing that we use with our children, because we're so focused on language acquisition, is actually, it's called a Lena device, but the best way to think about it is it's a Fitbit for words. So it's a small device that you can see up there in purple that our children actually wear that measures their expressiveness, and the numbers are matching what we see and observe daily anecdotally. Kids inviting other people and just conversing constantly. But we also knew that it wasn't just about how chatty our kids were, if they were talking more. It also was about what are they talking about and what will they be able to talk about in the future. And so we've also used an assessment to look at our children's vocabulary development over the time that they're in VOCEL's program. And what we've actually seen is that on average, our VOCEL children are growing 28 months of their vocabulary in 1 year in our program. So something that I think we're really proud of. We're excited to bring it to more children and families.
So that's the average that you see for our children across the board. But for Nehemiah, who we started talking about today, what has his journey of 2+ years at VOCEL looked like. So now, about 27 months after he started, Nehemiah is still the same little fun-loving, rambunctious, clever problem solver that he was when he started, but now his language is no longer a source of frustration for him. His inability to communicate is not blocking those other strengths from shining through. He has become truly a leader in our classroom and actually kind of a language leader. He leads conversations with the other kids, initiates conversations, and really supports the younger kids in our classroom as well. As Kelly said, we have quantitative results to match the qualitative, and as you can see up here, his expressiveness, his vocalizations, and also his ability to go back and forth with adults in conversation have just kind of skyrocketed since he started 2 years ago. And those results make us really super proud to see the quantitative that matches the anecdotal that we're seeing. We're proud of the language development, but I think what really gets us is seeing the relationships that language affords him the opportunity to have. And so seeing those authentic relationships that are possible for Nehemiah as a result of the language development, that's the part that really gives us.
So just in closing, I recently had the opportunity to hear David Brooks, one of my most favorite New York Times contributors, and he shared this with the group. Souls are not saved in bundles. I've rarely seen a program change a life. Relationships and love, those change lives. At VOCEL, this is just a sentiment we believe. If you do a quick little letter scramble of our name, within it is the word love. We're working with young children, and that's just critical. And we truly believe that if we bring, authentic relationships, empathy, and love to our program, we're going to set our children up to actually be the ones to forge a more connected world in the future and make it a better place.